Hey there, it's Christopher Wing again, and I am continuing my recap of my journey around the world to visit every Disney theme park on Earth in under 80 hours. When I last left off, I was at Disneyland Paris and had pretty much wasted a fair amount of time there getting my annual pass and seeing one extra attraction to try to make best of use of my time there. But that meant that I only had about 30 minutes to get out of the park, get across to the other theme park in Disneyland Paris and ride an attraction there. So it's interesting to note when it first opened in 1992, there was only one park. And the park next door, which is Walt Disney Studios, is actually just called Walt Disney Studios, not even Walt Disney Studios Paris or anything else. But I'm going to call it Disney Studios Paris for simplicity. Disney Studios Paris was built in 2002, basically exactly 10 years after the original park. And there's an interesting reason for that. I have a map here from Michelin from when Euro Disney was kind of in its first opening stages and planning stages. And if you open it up, there's a map of the property somewhere here. There it is. And if you look right there, it actually says right on it, second theme park. So it was always part of the original plan. In fact, there was actually a clause in their contract with the French government that legally mandated them to build a second theme park by their 10-year anniversary, which was 2002. But at that time, they had already had 10 years of operating Disneyland Paris. And if you know anything about Disneyland Paris, you may have heard that those first 10 years were kind of rough. They were not doing too well. In fact, the park was supposedly losing as much as $1 million a day. And now part of this was not just the operating costs of the park, but of the entire resort. In addition to the theme park, they decided to massively invest in building up hotels, and they built 5,000 rooms in 5 different hotels. And it was just an incredible amount of hotel inventory because they assumed that people would come and they'd spend the weekend or spend a fair amount of time at the park. But you know, this is a park that you could pretty much see in a day. So as a result, most of those rooms were empty, and a lot of those hotels ended up having to be shuttered, at least for slower periods of the year, which was kind of a first in Disney history. Nonetheless, I think they probably looked at the paperwork and said, hey, you know, maybe if we built that second theme park, there'd be too much for people to do in a weekend or a day, so they would have to come and they would have to get a hotel room and stay, and you know, then the real money would start flowing in. So they decided to go ahead and build the theme park that they were required to. But as with many things that you do only because you're pretty much legally required to do them, Disney decided to kind of hedge their bet a little bit. First of all, they didn't have a lot of money to work with. They had really massively overspent building the first park. If you go to Disneyland Paris, I've got to say it's one of the most aesthetically beautiful of all of the Disney theme parks, and you can really see where a lot of that money got spent. I mean, it's absolutely gorgeous. But as a result, I mean, they were in the red for so long that, you know, in order to build the second theme park, they just didn't want to make the same mistake twice and lavishly spend out so much. Plus, this is also the period of time where a guy named Paul Pressler was heading the Disney Parks and Resorts, and he was pretty well known for doing things very much on the cheap. So during his tenure, we saw the opening of Disney's California Adventure, which recently had to be renovated, and they actually spent more on renovating the park than it cost to build it in the first place. And then the second park in Paris, Walt Disney Studios Paris, you know, the same thing. They built it on the cheap, I've got to say. Here I actually have a copy of the original park map from the grand opening. And if I open this up, and you can take a look and see everything that's inside. But basically, there's hardly anything to do. I mean, if you go through and count the attractions, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 9. There's 9 things to do in the entire theme park. That's it. That's the entire theme park. And I actually, when I first went to it, I went online to, I think it was Mass Planet or one of those sites at the time, and I said, you know, I've been there and you can do the entire theme park in basically 3 hours if you time it right. And I mean, that's kind of crazy. So needless to say, building that second theme park did not bring people, you know, running in herds to stay at the Disneyland Paris hotels, and was not the financial savior that everybody thought it was. In fact, much like Disney California Adventure in California, it sort of became this sort of heroin monkey on the back of Disneyland Paris. I mean, Disneyland Paris itself was just starting to kind of edge into the black and was starting to turn a profit. But now suddenly you've got this second theme park that is just hemorrhaging money, and in order to fix it, you're going to have to spend 2 or 3 times as much as you spent to open it just to fix it, to make it look like a Disney theme park. It's sort of tragic, but I joke to my friends sometimes that, Disney Studios Paris has less, Disney magic and charm than my local Costco. And it's weird because they chose as their theme like a backlot of a Hollywood studio, but the backlot of a Hollywood studio is basically just a bunch of kind of warehouse buildings, and that's exactly what it looked like. Now I'm happy to report that in the years since Walt Disney Studios Paris first opened in 2002, they have done a lot of reinvestment and renovating. And in fact, basically the entire kind of right side of the park has pretty much been completely redone. They built a kind of Toon Studios area where they have a lot of Pixar themed rides. They built an entire kind of Pixar Toy Story land. And then they built a whole kind of little Ratatouille section in the back. And that actually had the ride that I was planning on riding during my trip around the world. So because I had wasted, or I wouldn't say wasted, but because I had spent so much time in Disneyland Paris, by the time that I actually got out of the gate through the Esplanade over to Disney Studios Paris, it's kind of roughly equivalent to the amount of space between Disneyland and California Adventure in Anaheim, maybe a little bit extra, but they're pretty much next door to each other. And by the time I got through there and got through bag check and got through with my new annual pass and got into the back of the park where Ratatouille is, I had basically only maybe about 15 minutes left before I had to leave the park. So I look at the ride, and at the entrance to the ride there is a sign saying, how long. Of course, they have Fast Pass, which I don't have a Fast Pass. They have the regular line, which was about 90 minutes, I think, at the time. And then they have single rider line, 5 minutes. And I thought, great. But then I was kind of worried about that, because if you've ever been in a single rider line, it really kind of depends upon the cast member working the attraction as far as how fast you get in. Luckily, I had a really good cast member. I got right on the attraction. Things are going well. They load us up. The cars start moving. It's a really fascinating ride. I don't want to ruin it for you, but it's got some of the kind of the similar technology that they use for, say, the Spider-Man attraction in Universal Orlando. But I'm on the ride and I'm having a great time, but then I suddenly overcome with this sense of dread, because I just realized that of all the attractions and all the rides and everything I'm going to experience in this whole trip, this is the only one that I have never, ever, ever been on before. I have no idea. I've never watched YouTube videos of it. I have no idea what it is. And I don't know, is this a 5-minute ride? Is it a 10-minute ride? Is it 15 minutes? Is it, gosh forbid, is it something like Ellen's Energy Adventure where it's darn near an hour? I'm hoping not that, but I'm looking at my watch the entire time I'm on it, and part of me is really loving the ride. It's a fantastic ride. I definitely recommend that you check it out. The theming is great. The technology is really incredible. I had a lot of fun on it, but I was looking at my watch every 5 seconds because I'm like, I love this ride, but I need it to be over. I need this ride to be over now. I need to get off this ride. So by the time that I actually did manage to get off the ride, I look at my watch and I have 7 minutes. 7 minutes to get out of this theme park, through security and bag check, through across the Esplanade to the train station, through the ticket stalls at the train station, figure out what track my train is on and get on the train and get going to the airport. And I am not lying when I tell you that I ran like nobody. I mean, forget about running through Newark Airport. This was like running at breakneck speed. I was really working up a sweat and my heart is pounding out of my chest. And I get to the train station and I look up and I manage to miraculously figure out what train I need to be on. Luckily I had a round trip ticket, so I already had my ticket, thank God for that. And then I'm running down the stairs, get to the train, and again, the whistle is being blown, last call, and I get on the train, and we pull out of the station, and I'm on my way, and I am huffing and puffing and just sweating buckets. And I'm just like, ugh. And I managed to get out on time, but then we pull out. It's about a 10-minute train ride, actually, nonstop, door to door, from Disneyland Paris to the airport. And the train station at the airport is like right in the middle of the airport. So it's great. It's one of the easiest connections of all of the Disney theme parks. But we get about 5 minutes out, and then all of a sudden the train stops, and we just sit there, and we sit there, and we sit there for like 5 minutes, and then we move along a little bit further, and we almost pull into. There's a tunnel where you go underneath the airport. We pull into that tunnel, and we're almost to the airport, and then it stops again. And now not only is it stopped, but now the lights go out on the train, and it's completely dead. And I'm like, no, no, this cannot be happening. I am not going to be stuck. I mean, what if they have to call the fire department and we have to be like evac'd off of the train? I'm like, all of these horrible scenarios are going on in my head. I'm like, no, this can't happen. And amazingly, after about 10 minutes, the lights come back on. The train continues sliding forward very slowly. We finally pull into the station in the airport. I get out of the train. We're probably about 15 to 20 minutes late. I get up to the check-in desk, which at Charles de Gaulle, by the way, is an enormous airport. So just, getting from the train to the check-in desk was like another marathon sprint, which I realize makes no sense. It's an oxymoron, a marathon sprint. But in any event, you know what I mean. I get there, and one thing I had not planned on, and one thing that I was kind of dreading throughout most of the journey was customs. So, I can plan, I can get whatever kind of, TSA pre-check and expedited entry and whatever else that I can for America as much as I can. But, since I'm not a citizen of the EU or of Hong Kong or anywhere else, I'm kind of at their mercy as far as how long they're going to take me to get me through customs and immigration. And, I don't know if you've ever been to an international airport, but sometimes, you get in with a whole bunch of flights arriving at once, and those lines can stretch on to infinity, it seems. So I lucked out because at Charles de Gaulle Airport, arriving was no problem. There was no line. They just kind of waved me through. Welcome to France. And in fact, they didn't even say word one to me. And then going back out, there were long lines. But I was flying business class on Cathay Pacific, and if you fly business class on Cathay Pacific, you get like front of the line pass for airport security. So I didn't have to wait in any lines, which worked out really nicely. So I estimate that I pretty much made up all the time that I had expected to spend at the airport going through customs and security by having that pass. So I managed to get to the airport lounge, and I was hoping that I would have time to change, especially now because I've been doing all this running. I was like sweating and miserable feeling, but I'm like, even that, I didn't really have enough time. I just had basically enough time to grab something to eat and then send all my emails and post my videos that I had taken, and then run to the gate and get on the next plane to Hong Kong. So that is where I'm going to have to leave this off for right now. I know that I'm kind of running through these in a whirlwind, but this is the part of the trip that really kind of became like a whirlwind. So maybe that's coming through a little bit. But things calmed down a little bit when I got to Hong Kong, and I guess that's where we're going to have to pick up the next time. So bye for now. Be sure, by the way, to check out my website, mousearoundtheworld.com, where you can hear some more behind-the-scenes information about my journey, as well as follow me on Instagram, mousearoundtheworld, and at mouseatw on Twitter, where I'll be posting other pictures and stories from my trip as well. Until then, see you soon.